right, my name is Chris Breinig. I've been in professional aviator for 35 years, trading hours for dollars in the cockpit of an airplane. Aviation's always been my passion. Started out float planes in Ketchikan and Wrangell. Flew 5 years on the waterfront in Ketchikan, beavers, and a little bit of otter time, a lot of Cessna time, 185. And then I moved to Seattle and lived there for 8 years and got into charter and medevac. And that's where I kind of ended up really in medevac and flying citations to begin with for a little bit, and then Learjet to finish out my career. Mostly of my flying, adult flying, has been in Alaska. I've flown out of Anchorage, air ambulance and medevac, charter up there. I got to see all parts of western Alaska, northern Alaska, down the Aleutians. And I knew from Yakutat to, the Queen Charlotte's like the back of my hand when I was bush pilot. Anyway,
So, Chris, what are the different ways to become a pilot? Is there a few different?
Yes, there is. I'm kind of been out of it, retired now for 8 years. And it's the technology of everything is so new and everything, you can purchase a thumb drive and put it into your laptop and do the ground testing and work alongside an instructor. But it's got to be where it's always been expensive to fly, but if you're not going to try and use it for a career and just use it recreationally, it's really expensive, and it's even expensive to get the licenses for a career and then to get the experience as well. But I would start, if I was interested in it, by doing research. Google it, find out what is available and out there. You can buy books, that then you can go in and show your progress in the study part of it, and then testing part of it, and then there's certain amounts of required time that you need to get a specific license, whether it be a private to start out with or a commercial. You need that to make money with it, and an instrument. All those, that private commercial instrument all have to, be
Right.
on board. And then after that is the ATP.
Mhm.
But the good way to do it is, I believe, is the military these days.
Uh-huh.
Absolutely.
So it's you're saying before, like that there, if you're starting out, there's a way that you get your own flight time or something like that, and
Yeah.
or you can go a commercial where they kind of try to set you up, or schooling,
Oh yeah, they're
and/or
starting that too.
and then like and or the military. So which can you explain a little bit about each one, and to give us a little bit more information about each one, and then maybe share which one you chose or which path you took.
Well, I didn't go to the military. I was civilian trained, and I went in and wanted to be a Navy pilot at one time at 28, and I was too old, the recruiter said. So, So anyway, I gave up, flying for the, military or whatever. But yeah, I chose to do private and go out and try and find the best instructors I could. And plus, I flew with some really wicked smart, really good pilots that mentored me along the way too. and I wound up becoming a Czech airman. That's a company sponsored pilot that does training and checking. So when I'm doing that part, I've got the company hat on, but when I do the check rides, I have to put the FAA hat on, and they have to make certain standards to pass. And if you don't pass, then you retrain. It seems like I'm rambling here a little bit.
No, that's okay. No.
Um,
So there's the one where you kind of do it yourself, and you have to go and either charter a plane and pay for that. It sounds like you said just before. It sounds like pretty expensive.
Yeah, rented the airplane, and then pay for an instructor. But then you get to a point where you can take it out solo, and have your license to fly. Like the jets, require 2 pilot crew, most of them, and a co-pilot and I call it a co-captain and a captain.
Okay.
I never looked at a person I flew with as a co-pilot. They were, because if I was dropped dead, they would become the captain. So anyway, I went civilian route. Military doesn't seem like a bad way to go if you're interested. You get a certain amount of stuff that they require, and if you can come in and pass their standards, they'll train you, and you get to fly some of the nicest, fastest, busiest jets there is. I was lucky to fly a Learjet for most of my career, and if you know any history about them, they're a sports car. They're fast and capable. They go a long ways, at least to 35. And then the other way is nowadays the airlines have their own flight schools. There's been a really severe pilot shortage. And just because of the cost and the training and the requirements to get the licenses and experience, people are getting engineering degrees, or it takes a long time and a lot of money and a lot of experience to get an airline job. But the airlines now are seeing that, and they have their own flight schools. You get your instrument commercial, I guess, and private instrument commercial, and they'll train you in, like, for instance, a 737 Boeing, and you go right out on the line with a 737 type rating experience, I guess. And the airlines are going to that. Having their own flight school and training them the way they want their pilots to fly.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So the benefit is you're training for specifically the plane that you're going to be flying.
Correct.
Awesome. And you said too that you started out flying bush plane in Alaska.
Yes.
That's
a
float plane.
I was kind of unique. I got hurt on a construction job, and I flew out to camp, and then I flew back in, and I had some stuff in my eye, and the doctors cleared me to go back to work. He said, "You just scratched it, but wear your goggles and your earmuffs," because I was running an air hammer, and we built the bridges out here when it was a logging road out of Thorn Bay. I helped build the Rio Roberts and the Rio Beer bridges when I lived here. But anyway, I was cleared out to camp from Ketchikan, and the guy's out there pumping his floats, and he's getting ready to take me out to Thorn Bay. And I asked him, I said, I've been on the end of a shovel all summer long, packing drill steel and dynamite, and so I was a lot healthier then. And I said, "How do I get a job like you?" And that's when he introduced me to a pilot here in Ketchikan that had a float plane. He also owned a bar. And we'd go out and fly, and he'd teach me how to fly. But one of the biggest things were, he made it fun. We'd go up to an alpine lake, and he had a couple of fishing rods underneath the seat and back, and we'd stand on the floats and catch grayling or rainbow or cutthroat, a lot of cutthroat,
Wow.
and I was hooked. So I got half of what was required for my private pilot and went down to Washington and finished it up at Kenmore in the float plane.
Wow.
And
So I'm sure, like flying up in Alaska, I know is a bit dangerous, especially float planes. Were there is that true, or is that just?
well, yeah, you look at the past of all the crashes in Alaska. Not only like personal people that fly up here, and professional people. It's between logging, fishing, and flying in Alaska. Those are the three most dangerous jobs,
Yeah.
especially if you're a bush pilot. But the technology, like I said, in, in the training, I think the ones that survive learn the new, touch screen stuff, and if they got in trouble, they could get themselves out of trouble with the avionics that they have nowadays. And the old bush beaver and otters and stuff that we never had. We had a whiskey compass on the dash and a directional gyro that precessed every 15 minutes, and so it was seat of the pants kind of stuff. And you learn to fly, really fly an airplane, stick and rudder experience. And that's the thing that I worry about getting in an airline these days. You read about tail strikes where, they're horsing the thing off and hitting the tail on takeoff on a jet, or hard landings. I just don't think the experience of the pilots that are coming on board nowadays have quite what it used to be.
Because it sounds.
Experience.
Because it was a little bit tougher back in the day, and the things that they required before you doing it was a little bit more needed more experience, or some of those experiences you think since they're not needed as much or they're not required as much, that it's the pilots themselves are probably missing out on some of those experiences, and it was a good thing to have.
Yeah, it was. I wouldn't have traded it really. I tried in one time when there was a kind of a pilot shortage. I got a interview with Alaska Airlines, but the guy that did the interview was the chief pilot back then, and he didn't like any of the six of us. We did a sim evaluation. I spent $1,000, which I could have spent on baby formula because I had kids, to freshen up, just to make sure that I, because I've been flying IFR, but it's still different, when you're in a big jet simulator, and even though it's kind of the same, it's different. So I practice in one just to, give me. But anyway, the next 2 days he passed everybody. They had an interview board, waiting for him to send guys over, and he just sent us all home. So they were a little bit ticked at that. I mean, some of us should have been able to fly, right?
Yeah.
They called us in for a sim interview. I think we looked good on paper, I guess.
Yeah.
But he didn't like what he saw for some reason.
Huh.
Sent him all home. But they talked to him about it. He says, okay, I'll show you. I'll go ahead and send everybody over on Tuesday and Wednesday. And that's what happened to a couple of my buddies that week. They were all flying, one was for Horizon, the other one was flying for Nordstrom.
Uh-huh.
And they in their corporate Westwind jet. And so they got on with Alaska, Dan retired a couple of years early back a few years ago as Alaska Airlines. He had 40 years
Wow.
with the Alaska Airlines Group,
Wow.
Alaska Air Group.
So what are some of the conditions you'd fly in when you're starting out in the float planes in Alaska that were like the more dangerous conditions, and was it like a pretty normal thing? I'm like, is it mostly the winter time or any time or?
Yeah, well, I guess wind conditions, water conditions,
Like what were
and
those looking
weather
like?
conditions.
Sure.
It depended on what you were flying. You know?
Yeah.
If you were flying a Beaver, you could land in a little bit more, wave and
Like how big of waves were you landing in on that were made you a little bit nervous? As big as how big?
well, Kasan is a good example. There's, the prevailing wind is from the southeast when it's bad weather, and that pushes in, whitecaps and stuff like that. Well, it's a day to go to Thorn Bay. You don't want to be landing in that stuff. For one thing, you have the possibility of wrecking the airplane or damaging the equipment. And then you got to think about, well, how the heck am I going to get out of here too, right? So, and the snow. I used to call it spontaneous generation. You'd be flying along and it's going to snow, but you could see 20 miles. But the horizon would start getting fuzzy, and it turned into whiteout within practically 5 minutes, And I gambled a few times with the weather when I was by myself. It was in the winter. It was snowing hard. And I was get home-itis, and I was pushing daylight. I mean, if all of those came together, you were setting yourself up to get hurt or killed. If you take a couple of those out of the equation, then, my motto was to fly safe, have fun, and live to fly another day. I didn't want to kill myself or kill anybody or hurt anybody in an airplane.
That's a lot of responsibility.
Yeah, and when I got married, I was 38 years, I'll be 39 this year. My wife and I were, 5'6", 5'7", but now I'm 5'3.5". I've got a titanium rod in this hip, titanium rod in this hip, one in this shoulder, and one in this shoulder. And I didn't want to actually have anybody outfly me. I was very competitive in sports, baseball, basketball, high school. After high school, I played tennis a lot. And there wasn't hardly anybody in Seattle that could beat me. I played it a lot and rode my 10-speed a lot.
That's awesome.
But anyway, because of the disease that ate away my cartilage and gnarled up my joints, had to cut them off and put artificial hips in and shoulders in. It's doing the same thing to my spine. It's just a disease that I was born with and knew about when I got tested at University of Oregon Genetics Health Science Center. They did a DNA test on me and said, yep, you have this. I said, what are you doing now? I said, well, I'm framing houses and packing sheetrock. He said, well, you ought to find another thing to do, because if you do at 40, you'll be in a wheelchair to keep it up. And so that's how aviation came about as well, to give you a little history on, going back to the beginning.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Anything else you want to ask?
Um, yeah, let's go. Remember one, maybe one or two flights that stick out in your mind that was just either very memorable or maybe a little bit crazy, like just they kind of stick out that you want to
yeah,
share?
yeah, and that's the flying in the snow, pushing darkness, getting trapped. I flew the mail plane up to Stewart, BC, and Hyder, and instead of going around the end of the peninsula and and then heading back up to Ketchikan on that side, I tried to take a shortcut. And I done it before, but it was snowing, and I kind of took a look at it, and it was in the backside of Walker Lake, and I got halfway through this pass, and it started snowing heavily, and I wasn't gonna just blindly keep going, so there was a little stand of trees down here, and I had visual reference. I kept that, and I just did turns about a point, which they teach you, around these trees to keep my visual reference. And every time I came around, I could have retreated out the back way, but that was the way I came in. But that was blocked off too. So eventually the weather cleared, but I was running, this was in a beaver, and I was running out of gas and fuel, and it broke open, and so I squirted in over the lake and dropped down and flew home. But I got home and I had 2 gallons of gas left in this beaver, and they burned, I think it was, 45 gallons an hour.
Whoa.
Yeah, radial. Let's see what else. And then in the snow, I was by myself, like in the mail plane. And I was up in, oh shoot, what is it? Right up outside of Cake. And there were some guys up there that wanted out of this camp. And I was in 185. And so the same thing, spontaneous generation. And it was very far from the salt water to the other inlet that I was going to. And I got halfway in there and it started snowing heavily. And I figured I'd be able to see the inlet, but I wasn't going to punch in, that snow that I was already into. And the same thing, I did it, turned around, and I'd flown up this little Muskeg River thing, and it wasn't frozen over or iced over, right? So I came back around to that and went back down and flew around by Petersburg, got some fuel, and went up and got them and brought them back. And then, I dropped them off.
So you have no, it's all sight. There's no
flight rules.
Yeah, there's no instrument panels that are telling you what's going on. It's all you have to be able to see that.
Not in those days. There wasn't.
Wow.
The CRT screens.
Yeah.
That you see in these airplanes now. That through the advent of avionics and the desire to have less crashes and better trained pilots with capstone and all that stuff, right? No, you just have to play it smart, really. I mean, be good at what you do, but you go through a cocky phase when you're first learning, hell, I can do this, kind of stuff. But you learn that does give you a very long timeline if you think you can beat the odds. And they train you in the simulators in the schools and stuff. Nowadays they're pretty sophisticated. full motion simulators that you don't even have to get in the airplane. You get out with a type rating and jump right in an airplane and go with the training and technology with the level D sims that they have. It's amazing, the simulation. And the hardest part with the corporate stuff that I flew briefly was the avionics. Flying the airplane, they all fly the same. And you get the book about the systems, your hydraulics, electrics, fuel. And then you get 3 books like that, just to run the magic, the radios and the navigation and what to do if somebody kicks the cord out of the wall, you just get a blank screen, right? So yeah, it's and then now the books and everything are on a thumb drive. You just plug them in your computer, you study up on it, you refresh, and that's what they call, what do they call that now? Recurrent training. And as a jet captain, you're required by the FAA to go get training in the airplane or a simulator. Obviously, your airplane is pretty expensive, but the simulators are so sophisticated and everything now. If you go and take a check ride in that, or do training in the sim, you don't. You good to go.